my desktop and we will go back to the presentation. Ooh, I've just done that again and not checked the sound. You'd think we'd have learned that lesson by now, wouldn't you?
I think we are a
Share
bit
sound.
tired. By now, we are a bit tired.
Oh, sorry about that. Oh yes, this doesn't work terribly well like this, does it? I seem to be having a call. Alona and 3 others want to talk to me. That's not going to work, is it? This is the P. Is that big enough, Pia? Can you see that?
It's very small.
Yeah, no, that's not going to work, is it? Well, let's try this one. Let's have a go at presenting it like this.
Okay, that's it. That's okay.
Do let me know if you can't hear the sound.
Fine.
So welcome. I have to start properly. Welcome everybody who's here and everyone who's watching live on YouTube and everyone who's watching the recording to the last hour of 24 hours back to back of PEI broadcasting live, actually from the polar regions as well as about the polar regions to celebrate this equinox and this polar week. I hope you will, if you have joined us at all, you will have seen how passionate and dedicated we are about the polar regions and about sharing information about the polar regions. And they are not a million miles away, because whatever happens in the polar regions, including the changing climate and what impact that's having, will have an impact on the rest of the world. So I'll just play this little video to introduce PEI, and then we'll introduce the next speakers for the last hour of our Share-a-thon.
Polar Educators International is connecting educators, polar researchers and communities for a better understanding of polar knowledge. Earth's polar regions are remote, beautiful and challenging places, and they have a profound influence on every one of us. We know these vast amounts of snow, forming ice sheets, sea ice and glaciers, together with massive currents of cold water, contribute dramatically to the climate and ecosystems of our world, systems which in turn drive the health of our local environments and communities. Research shows dramatic change in the Antarctic, in our mountainous regions, and particularly in the Arctic, home to over 4 million people, which is changing faster than anywhere else on Earth. Scientists are confirming that human activity is playing a significant role in these systems, increasing the planet's surface temperature in ways that cannot be balanced out by natural processes. It is clear the urgency to engage the next generation in polar research and to rise to the challenges that a changing climate will bring has never been greater. United in our passion for sharing the importance and value of the polar regions, educators and researchers from around the world have formed PEI, an essential global network developing polar knowledge to engage a global audience facing climate change. We are collaborating to strengthen this community, building resources and relationships, and helping local audiences connect polar research to their everyday lives. Polar Educators International amplifies the voices of all those dedicated to understanding and protecting our extraordinary polar regions, and all Earth's inhabitants, for generations to come. Join us.
Okay, I'll just I hope that explained why we're all here. Nice to see you still here, Natalie. Nice to see you, Lindsey, as well. I'm going to let Pia introduce you while I just line up whatever is in the magic folder to show to people.
Yes, in the magic folder there's only Julia. The short contribution of Julia. So we just I can't hear you. You're mute.
Unmute my
okay,
audio. A bit of a Zoom moment there. A bit of a Zoom
okay,
moment. Sorry. Shall we record now?
I would say so. Yes.
Okay. I hope, Lindsey, you don't mind, but
Is that okay?
We'll try and find how I record. I don't want to stop the live stream. There it is. There it is.
Okay.
Record to the cloud.
Oh, the cloud. Okay. Well, okay. Lindsey, thank you so much for joining us for the conclusive hour of our 24-hour Share-a-thon of Polar Educators International. I really chose to have the final hour on the ASM3, the Arctic Science Ministerial, because really it was our participation at Polar Educators International to the ASM3 for the fourth strengthen side of the ministerial meeting that really gave us an opportunity to think about our direction and where we wanted to go. So it has been a huge growing initiative for us to pinpoint where we wanted to go, and our deliverables are really giving us this direction. So it is kind of fitting to finish off with you and the Arctic Science Ministerial. And I would really like our listeners who may not know much about it to learn it from the person that actually was in charge of it and knows more about it than anybody else. So the floor is yours, Lindsey. Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much, Pia, and thank you, Sophie, and just for inviting me to be here. I can definitely attest that PEI has been a very active member of the Third Arctic Science Ministerial, and I just think it's really wonderful to see how these larger international frameworks can help organizations as well as countries like really help prioritize their priorities as an organization or a country in terms of how they interface with the kind of international Arctic research landscape. So it was wonderful to kind of bring PEI into the ASM family this year, and hope that, you know, many years to come, that this continues to be sort of part of what PEI does. And yeah, I think it's been really good. So I have a presentation that is not nearly as entertaining as the previous, but I can share that now. Oh, it looks like you need to enable me to share, if that's okay.
Mute my audio first so that I sound like a human being. Now I need to go to I need to go to security. I'm having a Zoom moment. I don't want to enable. There we go.
Perfectly deserved.
Does that
24 hours we are just about.
Does that enable you to share your screen? Great.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's great. I can see it.
You
Super.
can see it now.
Can everyone else see it who's here? I hope so. I don't know. Jose might have disappeared for a bit. Fab.
Okay, so you know, my intention here is just to kind of run through what the Arctic Science Ministerial is and how it was structured, and how PEI and other kind of education frameworks fit into that, and hopefully bringing a bit of a special focus here to how education fits into the overall kind of ASM scene. So for those of you who don't know, the Arctic Science Ministerial was an initiative that started with the United States in 2016 and was hosted in Washington, D.C. And the basic structure of it is that it happens every 2 years, although this was kind of disrupted because of COVID with ASM3. So the second Arctic Science Ministerial took place in Berlin in 2018. And that was jointly hosted by Germany, the European Commission, and Finland. And so what ASM2 did was kind of start this new context of having an Arctic state that was currently in the chairmanship position of the Arctic Council, as the US was when they had ASM1, And then Finland with ASM2 would then partner with a non-Arctic state to co-host this event. So that's how Germany and the European Commission came into the scene with ASM2. So in 2018, Iceland and Japan agreed to host ASM3, which was announced at ASM2, and that's when our planning process really began. So we had originally intended to hold ASM3 in November of 2020, but it was postponed because of COVID, and eventually it did take place in Tokyo this year, in May of this year. And we had a really successful hybrid meeting where we had people both on site as well as joining online. It was a multi-day event, so we're really thankful that it actually came together in the end. So these are just a few photos from the actual event that happened in Tokyo in May. So just to kind of give some context here, what we initiated was something called the ASM3 science process. And the intention here was to bring in scientific input from the countries, from the 28 different countries who participated, as well as the 16 international organizations. So that includes PEI, as well as the 6 Arctic Indigenous Peoples organizations who participate as permanent participants in the Arctic Council. So these were all sort of the invitees to who participated in the ASM science process. And this is really the foundation of what the ASM is. We receive all of the scientific input of all of the different projects and international collaborations and opportunities happening around the Arctic in terms of scientific research. And then we kind of categorize them all into themes. And that's where all of the outcomes from the ASM are really established. So we have a final report with a synthesis of all of the projects. We have the joint statement of the ministers that are signed by all ministers who participate. We had a webinar series that resulted from all of this, which PEI also participated in. And then we also have an actual database, which is kind of a new deliverable to this ASM of mapping all 434 projects that resulted from this ASM process that are now searchable online in an open access format. So these were the themes of ASM3. Our overarching theme was knowledge for a sustainable Arctic. And I just want to kind of bring some special attention to theme 4 here. Each of the ASMs have had individual themes, but they're really kind of iterations of the previous ones. And what we did here with ASM3 is we saw all of the themes as not really hierarchical, but rather we view them in kind of a cyclical nature that each informs the next. So you could end with strengthen, or you could begin with strengthen as kind of the foundation for how each of these themes informs the next. For ASM1, there was a focus kind of on education, but that theme was then removed for ASM2, thinking that it would maybe be achieved in other means. And we saw for ASM3 that it was really important to bring back this focus on education. So that's also a reason why it made so much sense for PEI to join the ASM process at this point, because we really wanted to focus more on education and capacity building and education in a lot of different formats. So there's kind of some special emphasis there. The way that we reviewed and kind of synthesized this whole science input through the science process, we had a science advisory board of experts from around the Arctic, mostly representatives from different international organizations, to help us really comb through and understand everything that was submitted. So their work was tremendous, and we're very grateful to them. Essentially what we did, there were kind of different ways for people to give feedback under each theme. And for the countries and organizations like PEI, there was this really formal process of both submitting their Arctic research overviews, as well as any project updates of things that they have going on. And it's those projects that are then available in the final ASM3 report, as well as mapped in the ASM database that we have online now. But we also held quite a few community workshops, which because of COVID all happened online, although they were intended to happen in person. But they were really successful. We had hundreds and hundreds of participants from around the world, and early career researchers to, policymakers who are inside ministries and everyone in between. So that was actually really successful. And then we also had just some online feedback forms too, just to capture even more information from those who wanted to give it, because as we know, time zones is a real challenge to attend all of these things. So we had to kind of create multiple streams of input to capture all of the science that we wanted. We also sent out a cooperation and collaboration survey that's kind of trying to get at the state of international cooperation. What are the gaps and barriers to research in international cooperation? And so that's also emphasized and synthesized in the final report. So this is just kind of a look at how the science process worked. As you can see, we have these categories of governments and indigenous peoples organizations, as well as international organizations, and then kind of the wider international research community. And so how they gave that input, and then sort of what those final results look like in the ASM process. Again, just kind of a look at, what did all these forms look at? This was all a development of the ASM3 process, where we're really trying to formalize the scientific input for this process, so that we can begin to institutionalize, what the ASM is and how it functions, which helps us track progress on projects and participation over time. So for ASM3, we had 434 projects submitted, which is the most so far of any of the ASMs. And it was a really big task to work through it all. But, in the end, I think it just made the whole results of everything much richer. All of these images are available in the ASM report, so you can find those there as well, and that's freely accessible and downloadable on the ASM3 website. So as you can see, we kind of divided up the projects submitted by themes, and we're talking today about theme 4, strengthen, which is kind of the bucket under which education fits. And there's a lot of room for growth there. I think we saw this theme as a very high interest. Education is a high interest of a lot of the different projects submitted. Many people would like education to be a component of their project submitted, but they're still looking for pathways and connections for how to bring that education component into their research. And I think PEI is really serves as a tremendous connector in that case there, of how we could, perhaps amplify that connection between the research going on and the education component that could come into it. So as I mentioned at the top, we kind of have these key outcomes of the ASM process that I'm just gonna breeze us through right now. So this is the final report and the joint statement. And then we have these online resources as well, the ASM3 project database, accessible as the international opportunities and resources, as well as all of the recordings from our webinar series. So this is just a look at the final report. Again, it's available on the ASM3 website. And a big chunk of the report is the science summary, which is the synthesis of all of the science that was submitted through the science process. And we break it down by theme. What's special about this report is we've tried to make everything in the report easily searchable, and all of the links are live in the report. So it's really a useful tool and not just kind of a online PDF that helps you connect to all of the information and projects and organizations that were submitted. So we hope that that's a useful tool for people and that you can share it widely. And, we tried to make it really online reading friendly. So it's not just something that sits on your bookshelf. And we also just have some more statistics to share. That's kind of a breakdown of the project submitted through the themes and by country, and that sort of information is interesting and useful. And then we come to the joint statement. A really specific focus for the joint statement this year was that we wanted to complete our whole science process before the actions of the joint statement were decided upon and discussed at a policy level, because we wanted those actions to be well-founded in the scientific feedback that we received through the science process. So this is not, just some sort of nice language that's been signed by the ministers, but we wanted strong actions associated with each of the themes. And you can download the joint statement also on the ASM3 website. Theme 4 is where organizations that have a focus on education, like PEI, are specifically called out. So, really looking at one of the near-term actions being encouraging multinational participation in field station and ship-based research, and looking at some of the international organizations that are associated with that, but then also encouraging, the development of Arctic strategic communications initiatives in collaborations with organizations like PEI. And so seeing PEI as a really strategic partner for countries to try to come through on promises around actions with education. And so, there's a really direct link there with some of the objectives that we have in fulfilling connection to education, and organizations that already exist, like PEI, with this wide global network to actually enact those actions and connect with their audience and members who are already in place. A big bulk of the report too are these Arctic research overviews. This is basically your phone book for understanding what organizations and countries are doing in terms of Arctic research, what their infrastructure is, what they want to highlight, what they have, in terms of collaboration tools and uses. So this is a super useful tool, and PEI is also highlighted here. But it's your directory to find cooperation opportunities. We also highlight in the report our webinar series, and that you can still find all of the recordings. This was something that we did in partnership with the European Polar Board. So all the recordings are on YouTube. We have a specific webinar that was focused on theme 4 within education overview. And PEI participated in that. And we also had some specific workshops as part of the webinar series, and all of those are also recorded and available. And finally, we have this part of the report that's called Moving Forward, and this is where we really identified a lot of the gaps and barriers in research, and education and outreach was definitely an area that could be expanded. In education infrastructure, in terms of connection to rural education and the ability of local Arctic residents and Indigenous peoples to practice education that is relevant to their communities. That's one big component. And then connecting the global network of Arctic educators and those who want to know more about the Arctic. These are, two pieces of education that are really important to kind of the forward movement in the future development of Arctic research. Finally, just what I've been mentioning, one of the new deliverables of this ASM was this ASM3 project database. All of the projects can be searched. You can look through location, keywords, countries, however you want it. And this was a huge effort made by our friends and co-collaborators in Japan at the National Institute of Polar Research in Japan to make this database happen. We hope that it's widely used. We hope that it is updated for future ASMs, but this is a wonderful collaboration tool for organizations, especially like PEI, that are looking for project collaboration or research our connection for early career researchers around the Arctic, where you can just search, find out what projects are happening there. You can get in touch directly with the project leads, and that's all available and accessible through the database. So that's pretty much the end. And just a reminder that we have the ASM3 website that we're still working to update with all of the kind of final products and make it more searchable for all of these resources. But you can find there now the report, the joint statement, links to the database. All of that is available at asm3.org. So with that, I hand it back to my capable colleagues at PEI.
Thank you, Lindsey. Now we can see the full extent of what you were involved with every time you got those phone calls from PEI saying, what do we do next? We don't know what. I think this has just been, I mean, I don't know if you agree, we have got something else to play. We've got Julia telling everyone about what PEI proposed, but this is clearly quite a different Arctic Science Ministerial for a number of reasons. Number one, what's happening in the Arctic is suddenly right in front of everybody. Perhaps maybe when the whole process of Arctic Science Ministerials began, people still felt it was a distant place. And yeah, maybe there was a bit of climate change stuff going on, but we didn't have to pay any attention to that. But suddenly, now obviously politics has swung around, and right now we're just approaching COP26. Who knows what might happen there? So first of all, I'd like to thank you, because I think that in embracing all of these fiddly bits, including PEI, embracing all of these, not quite so simple bits, I think actually that you've played a huge role in making this process more meaningful and hopefully more impactful. But I'd love to hear, I wonder whether you knew what you were getting yourself into just when you accepted the job, by just looking at ASM1 and ASM2 and how you feel about how different ASM3 might be in comparison. And possibly you could look forward to ASM4.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I think it was a wonderful opportunity for Iceland and Japan to cooperate on ASM3. That was a unique relationship, and I think we were luckily really aligned with what we wanted to do with it and how we wanted to prioritize the role of scientists and educators and researchers in this ASM, and hopefully really draw that full connection from the researcher to the policymaker and what happens with everything in between. So that was a clear objective for us, and we just wanted to do it in a transparent and inclusive way that really prioritized kind of a bottom-up approach to our learning and the scientific input into the final products of the joint statement. So we sort of decided on that from the beginning, and then chose those as sort of our guiding principles, and how we could follow that through. And it was a big task that was certainly not made easier by COVID, because we had planned all of these kind of in-person events at ISAR 6, ASSW, ICAST 10 to have these kind of meaningful personal connections. But we were really lucky to get to cooperate with EPB through this webinar series, because I think that brought back a lot of that personal connection with the larger scientific community that, we were worried we were going to miss.
That's the European Polar Board, for anyone who doesn't know what the acronym means. European Polar,
European Polar Board, who were just wonderful collaborators with us, and they helped bring that piece back into the picture. And this is only the third Arctic Science Ministerial, so what we had hoped was that we could do something to build some of the institutionalization of this ASM, and hopefully make it easier for future organizers that they have, this kind of context and playbook that can, be implemented in the future and then built upon and do things that we weren't able to do. So we are working now with the next hosts for ASM, and Russia and France have agreed to host ASM4. we're going to be holding the official handover of ASM3 to ASM4 in just a few weeks here in Reykjavik as part of the Arctic Circle Assembly. And so France and Russia have been, wonderful and eager early partners in this. So we're really looking forward to what comes next.
I have a question for Lindsey, which I wanted to ask for a very long time since I first had a chance to talk to you. What made you go to Iceland to do your work? Is it for the ASM3 or is it a permanent job and ASM3 went into that?
Yeah, well, this gives me a chance to highlight the wonderful polar education opportunities here in Iceland, because I came here for my master's in polar law, which is a really wonderful program at the University of Akureyri in the north of Iceland. And I highly encourage anyone who has an interest in the international law in the polar regions, so looking both at the Antarctic and the Arctic, to consider this program. I learned everything I need to know there. And so it was through, being a student in Akureyri and then moving down to Reykjavik and starting work at the Ministry of Education, Science and Culture here at the time that Iceland and Japan agreed to work on this. And I have a background in East Asian studies and speak Japanese and lived in Japan and worked at a Polar Cooperation Research Center in Japan. So for me, it was a really wonderful, just personal moment to bring together my polar and East Asian education background. So yeah, that's my just individual story in that.
Oh, thank you for sharing it with us because you did it with such competence and such also lightness of touch. That was what we really appreciated because we really were a bit lost. I think we filled up about 60 pages or more, and because it happened in the summer, and it was the summer just after the lockdown.
Yeah.
I remember, and I was in central Italy, in Fermo. I remember that we ExCom, the sort of vice president's group, with Julia as president, we met practically almost every day.
We did.
Almost. It was about 4 times a week. And when we didn't meet, we had this wonderful Google Drive in which we were sort of improving. And at one time, I remember I was writing in sort of my color, and suddenly I see this pink color. That was,
there were lots of us typing.
And she was erasing what I was writing. And I was writing.
It's international collaboration. What do they call it?
Exactly. And now you know also sort of what the ASM planning process is like as well. And I think that's what makes it all worth it. I know, especially in the time of COVID, we were all facing a lot of challenges with how to get these really big objectives done in this totally new landscape for all of us. But, having the phone calls that we had with organizations like you guys, like that's also what makes it worth it, because you're building personal connections. And I don't think any of this would be worth it if we didn't end up with some personal relationships on the other side that we can build upon and actually take action on the things that are important. So yeah,
I'm glad you said that, because we're not policymakers, we're educators. We're sort of at the coal face, and we work on building relationships with children and students and each other. So that's great. That's good.
Yeah.
But I actually believe that it's a bit what Peter wrote in his book, A Farewell to Eyes, as I want to give a bit of
plug.
Actually, we use it to lift the computer. Anyway, sometimes the laptop is too slow. It's too low, so you lift it. But what he was saying is that really politicians have to be called into account by the public. And if there isn't, the education that starts when kids are in primary school, and you sort of catch them when they're young, kind of thing, and then working their way up, they will be the ones that will learn at influencing policies. I mean, just look at the Fridays, the movement of Greta Thunberg, how it took off. And that wasn't definitely anything political. It was, but it achieved a very strong political status. So I think the future
no, I
is
think
more.
that's exactly right. And I think actually, you know, when I think about our focus in this ASM of bringing that education focus in, we were fortunate in Iceland that our Minister of Education and Science and Culture, Lilia Efrosotur, like she really cares about early education. So when we talk about that connection to education, for her, she's not just thinking about higher education, as many do, especially when it comes to Arctic research, but really thinking about youth and future. And, you know, for her, that's the connection to our climate discussion. So I also have to give tribute to her for giving us the kind of mandate to bring that education focus back into this ASM, because, you know, as you said, like not all politicians are interested in that. So yeah,
maybe
we were
if we get to Hoffen, if we thank you. If we get there next year to Iceland to our conference, then maybe we could meet her face to face and say thank you for that, and she can meet some educators who are passionate, dedicated. Can't remember the other values, Pia, but I keep forgetting them. But welcoming, passionate, dedicated,
dedicated and competence also.
Competent, competent, well informed.
Well, but certainly we don't want to lose touch with you, Lindsey, because you really have been a marvelous asset. And in fact, the one deliverable that has come out from our involvement with ASM3, which we still have to think up and think it up seriously, is the World Cafe, is the global conversation. And we are putting the foundations of it, having this amazing new council, which is in fact has got quite a number of indigenous people, like you have seen just what happened in the hour before. It was just amazing how that input is absolutely necessary. And we really owe it to the way that ASM3 has been managed, because you know, it could have been just you know, lip service to education, but you didn't need to be that. So maybe we want to give a last voice to Julia and her wonderful presentation at ASM3.
So Julia Dooley, who I'm not sure she's on at the moment, but she was the outgoing president of PEI and has been president for a number of years, holding the flag there. And under her guidance, I think we have reached out and begun to be a bit braver about how we connect with polar science and with the indigenous peoples and with policymakers. So through the ASM3 process, we came up with 3 deliverables, and we also got together, as Pia said many times, to think really hard about what we felt was the most important thing about polar education. And I think that's why we called this this presentation Taking Polar Education Upstream. So over to Julia and her presentation. Let me know if you can't hear the sound, please.
PEI is very grateful for the opportunity to be here with you. Founded in 2012, Polar Educators International, or PEI, was created by dedicated members of networks formed during the International Polar Year as a direct outcome of the Montreal Conference under the theme, From Knowledge to Action. By leading dialogue and collaboration between educators and researchers, PEI aims to highlight and share the global relevance of the polar regions. PEI represents all who work to inspire appreciation and build knowledge of the polar regions, their connectedness to all Earth systems, and their importance to all humans across latitudes and cultures. A PEI member is anyone interested in making the poles accessible, promoting understanding and stewardship of the polar regions, and seeking to grow polar literacy. Our community of scientists, educators, graduate students, community activists, museum educators, policy researchers, digital communicators, early career scientists, artists, cruise ship citizen science practitioners, and myself, school classroom teachers. We work together to accomplish our goals and the education of future global leaders. The 3 C's of PEI's core strengths are how we connect the qualities of scientific and educational organizations, defining our unique position, which allows us to provide a deeper understanding of current polar sciences to a global audience. We are deeply committed to PEI's ethos and wish to see it expand, reaching an important place of influence. This ambition can only be fully achieved if we have a secretariat to take care of the daily running of PEI, leaving its members the freedom to increase its influence in the polar world and the world of education in its widest sense. Whichever institution is in a position to host a PEI secretariat will gain the experience of a large number of educators coming from diverse backgrounds and qualifications, but with a common goal: to make polar science in the polar world available and to grow partnerships with Arctic and Indigenous organizations. PEI works with partners to support and connect people within and outside of the Arctic. As a community of practice, polar educators support and learn from one another. Given the means to build capacity, we connect an essential, stable, and trusted network contributing to Arctic research, providing platforms for exchange of good practice and professional development for researchers and educators. A firm administrative base will enable PEI to achieve another goal, using its connections to keep Arctic literacy up to date and relevant, and to take the concept of polar engagement and education upstream in the Arctic science process. This can be accomplished by building goals into research proposals that include community members and learning opportunities in fieldwork, data collection, and more diverse publishing and engagement activities. PEI believes that polar educators and learners have a role to play in all of the ASM3 themes: observe, understand, respond, and strengthen. We have submitted 3 deliverables for the project. Andre mentioned the first one, thank you. We propose to share an updated digital version of the Polar Resource Book with our partner organizations. This work is in progress. We're about halfway, well, beginnings, and now reaching out and seeking new funding opportunities to start working on some of the work of the new book. They'll provide easily accessible tools to strengthen teaching and communication of important Arctic science. Next deliverable is our, next thing, thank you, Iceland 2022. It's supposed to be 2021, but of course with our current situation, we have put that off a year. So we're going to have our next 5th and international conference to Hoffen, Iceland, with themes focused on polar education relevant to knowledge for a sustainable Arctic, offering a direct opportunity for 50+ participants. In the meantime, we will host a full table of online events to build interest and excitement. Our first event will be our lesson in Icelandic, so I can learn how to pronounce this word. That will be happening later this month. Our events will be running from April through mid-October, leading up to our in-person conference sign-up time. It's got a little something for everyone. The second event will be a virtual walk to connect the miles from our previous conference in Cambridge, UK to Hoffen, Iceland, so 2,000 miles or so. We've got some great other things coming up. Little something for everyone. Our third is a global conversation. It's going to be a network weaving opportunity based on a concept of a world cafe to bring conversations to the table that address identified gaps and barriers encountered in the strengthen theme. Big on the list was inclusivity and upstreaming education, building resilience in the Arctic. So we'd like to invite people to be part of that table conversation. So you can find more information about that on our website coming up. Thank you.
I remember how much we practiced on that, because each word had to mean something. There wasn't space for one extra word. So
yes, it's a big step for PEI, because, as I said at the beginning, we are basically teachers and educators. We're not paid in any way to sort of be part of PEI. So to have the courage to step forward and make such a bold commitment is new for us, but we're determined. So anyone who knows anybody who might want to host a secretariat, please put them in touch with us, because we can offer a lot, and we're not going to ask very much. We're just going to ask for someone to help us with the, basic admin and a bit of help with the website, I think.
Yeah, that's
so that we can get on with doing the other things. But obviously, if anyone knows anyone who'd like to offer more than that, that's great. That's great too. We could do with a paid president.
Yeah, well,
if you imagine that our president has been doing her job, well, both presidents, the new one too, are doing their education jobs, as well as PEI, you'll know that the dedicated word means what it says.
Yeah, but we all believe in what we're doing. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. Nobody.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So
yeah, absolutely. Here we are. Yeah,
24 hours away.
Yes. Well, I'll for one last time, I'll just share that slide presentation, Pia, about why we did this, for anyone who is out there watching live on YouTube or watching a recording. We've been doing this, as Pia said and Julia said, Sladbord of, maybe we'll ask Lindsey to pronounce that. How would you pronounce Sladbord, Lindsey?
You did a good job.
Oh, thank you. You sound just like the Google Translate thing. Excellent. Which is a loaded table of events. We felt that because we had to postpone our conference, that we ought to have a sort of pathway to Iceland. And we very much hope we can go there in person, at least some of us. But we will run that conference, which runs from the 11th to the 15th, I think, of April. We will run it in a hybrid fashion, and we're trying to work all of that out now so that we don't have to cancel it again. If everything does lock down again due to this global pandemic, we'll reach out to you online, just like Lindsey knows how difficult that is to reorganize at the last minute, but we are going to try and work out a way of doing that. So the 11th to the 15th of April, just to let you know a bit about the conference, I think we are now settled on a title which is something like Stories in Ice. We hope to make the most of being in Iceland, and one of the ways we're going to do that is that being inspired by the fact that it's really quite a long way from Reykjavik to Höfn, about 4 hours, we've extended that even further by hiring a bus. And so part of the workshop is going to be sort of nomadic, where COVID permitting and COVID restrictions permitting and COVID precautions permitting, we will travel that distance with a narrator, and by stopping along the way and seeing various things. We're all very keen to actually get on the ice, so we're hoping to get on the ice as well. Uchtor, who is part of the conference organising committee, has been a scientist on the glaciers, monitoring the glaciers for many years. So we're hoping to visit a glacier, but also many other spots along the way. And we'll also have a bus journey on the way back. So it's quite a different endeavour for us. We've never done that, but we're going to make use of the journey. And then we hope that the in-person bit will be as fabulous as PEI conferences always are, that we'll meet new people, that we'll meet those people face to face, that we will work together to co-develop resources and to share the resources that we've developed, and to get hands-on planning and developing and sharing activities that we know work in the classroom or outside the classroom or in a museum or wherever it is you're a polar educator. So this 24-hour broadcast has been part of our journey to whet your appetite to come to Iceland in April next year.
Like, if possible, Sophie, there should be a tiny bit to be broadcast as the closing thing. Like, I was in South Korea, and what I did at the end of a beautiful peace bar meeting was music.
Okay,
and
I'll play the INUD or whatever, however you pronounce it. I promise I'll go and find it. You might have to talk while I go and find it.
It's just in the same. It should be together with Julia's in the same. It was included. If it happens, okay.
I'll find it. I'll find it.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure you will.
Promise. I'll leave this slide up, even though I'm not in present mode. Sorry, I'll just leave this slide up at the end, which is the opportunity to continue a conversation. So for anybody who's watching a recording, it'll still be this will be up and going, the Slack channel, but PEI are trying out Slack as a way of asking questions, engaging different people in dialogue around the world. So if you do have anything burning to say, if you've been inspired by anything during this 24-hour broadcast, please do jump on Slack. It's yet another app that you have to register with, but also will help us engage. And before I do the next bit, I just want to say thank you to our president. I'm just going to click on these. Thank you to our president, Betsy Wilkening, who hopefully is still sleeping in bed in Arizona at the moment, but who wobbled several times during the process of planning 24-hour broadcast, saying, what on earth are we trying to do this for? We're all teachers. How are we going to manage it? But here we go. We did it. We bloomin' did it. I can't swear online, but we did it. 24 hours. Continuous of broadcasting by polar educators and polar researchers and Indigenous communities about the polar region. So thanks to Betsy for having faith in us. Thanks also to these three lovely people here. Pia Casarini, who you have here live. We have Betty Trummell, who is also in bed. Where's Betty at the moment, Pia? Whereabouts in the world is she? She's in the USA, isn't she?
She lives on Cape Cod. Betty is the one on the extreme right. But she was in her cabin in Colorado, and just now she is actually on a plane going to California for a wedding. So she had to leave and go to California for a wedding. And the
very
lady
good.
Is,
the lady in the middle, it's Joanna.
Joanna Hubbard.
Joanna Hubbard.
Also a very, very good technical help, and she's teacher.
Also asleep.
Yeah, well, she's the one that stayed up until midnight.
And she'll be teaching in school today. Cool. And then Ram is actually here with us, but I'm Sophie, and Ram's there wearing his yellow jacket in his image. We tried to be the backup team, keeping things going in the background.
You are always into everything, Sophie. I mean, founding member, designer of the logo. We must say, you are the designer of the logo. So.
I'm wearing it. I'm wearing the logo.
Exactly.
I'm proud of it. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing. I'll let Pia finish off, and I'll just go and find the beautiful INOD music. Does anyone else want to say anything? Please chip in.
I'll say something if it's okay, because I'm sort of so sad to be coming at the end of a whole process, and it's wonderful to see what the process has been, because I know Maria Pia. I've just been too busy to do it sooner, but it's inspiring, and it's so inspiring to see young, beautiful women talking, because most of the time in Facing Future, the people talking are old. I'm not prejudiced, but they're old men with grey hair. And it's just nice to see something else happening. So I'm so It's so inspiring. I will definitely contact my local schools and see whether the kids can get involved in polar education. And good luck and love to all of you.
Thank you, Nora. Let's get the teachers just to look into our website. They can enroll. It doesn't cost anything, but they can then benefit of the polar book that is online, free to download. And now we are going to get another book by one of the presenters from Canada that I actually met about a week ago through a friend, and she has written this book about the life in the Arctic as an educational tool, and she had got it translated in French and in Inuktitut, and she wanted it to be free. So that book is free to anyone to download. So these are the kind of connections that we like. So let's get more, just spread the word. Spread the word that we exist and we believe in what we are doing.